Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. It is time for me to do my list of the best books that I read in 2019. I honestly wasn't sure to make the list, top 10 or top 19. For the past couple of years, I've been doing like top 16, 17, 18 to match the year that I'm doing it, but I'm not sure how long I want to keep that going because once it's like 2023, do I really want a top 23? But I guess for now I'm just gonna stick with my top 19. It's not too long of a list, but it also gives me some room to choose some books that I think deserve to be on that list. It still was a little bit hard to narrow it down. I had 35 books on my Goodreads shelf that I labeled best of 2019. I do this every year just to make it easier on myself when I want to do a year-end wrap-up for like the best books of the year. So let's just jump into it. Here are my top 19 books that I read in 2019. I'm gonna start off with my top 3 just because I don't really want to choose a top like one. Originally it was The Bride Test when I made my best books of 2019 so far video back in July. I'll leave a link to that video if you want to check it out. A couple books from that list are still on this final list, but I took out a lot of them as well. Here are my top 3 and then the rest of my top 19. So my top 3 in no particular order. Of course, I'm gonna say The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. I thought it was just so brilliant. I loved it even more than The Kiss Quotient, although The Kiss Quotient I kind of gave 4.5 stars, but this one was absolutely 5 for me. I loved Kai, I loved Esme, I loved Esme's journey. A lot of her immigration story is very similar to how my parents immigrated to the US. I myself am part Vietnamese and I just loved seeing that culture in this book, from the language, the food, to Esme being so very homesick for her homeland. So if you haven't read this book, this is basically like a modern day mail order bride story. The hero Kai, who is the cousin of Michael from The Kiss Quotient, his mom wants him to get married. So while she's in Vietnam for a little bit, she ends up meeting Esme and thinks that she would be the perfect bride for Kai. He of course doesn't want a bride or mail order bride at that and doesn't expect Esme when he, comes home one day. Esme herself takes this chance to get a better life for herself and her family, her daughter. Kai is also autistic, so it's a very neurodivergent kind of romance. I thought the romance was just so beautiful, so sweet. I felt so hard for Kai and Esme. It was just so freaking good. I am currently dying for the next book, The Heart Principle, but I believe the publisher pushed the release date back to 2021 instead of next year, 2020, which is so devastating. I mean, I'll wait forever for Helen Hoang, but I'm just really excited for Kwan's book, who is Kai's brother. The second book in my top 3 of 2019 is actually a duet, and you can probably guess what it is. It is the All the King's Men duet by Kennedy Ryan. Book 1 is The Kingmaker and book 2 is The Rebel King. I don't have the paperbacks, but I did order them from the author, so hopefully they'll ship soon. This duet was absolutely mind-blowing. I loved it. Kennedy Ryan's writing is just so brilliant. Reading that book made me realize just how much I love her writing and how much I missed it. It's just a really brilliant duet that's got such a strong, powerful romance, as well as all these aspects of politics, the heroine's Native American culture, activism, the voices of minorities, like all of that was just blended so perfectly and written so well. I was just in awe of that duet when I read it. I do have to say though that book 2, The Rebel King, made me cry so hard. Did not expect such a, I don't want to say what exactly it is just because it's super spoily, but yeah, I was bawling. And I rarely cry for books, so props to Kennedy Ryan for that. The Kingmaker was also one of our monthly book club reads for Ravished by Romance. I'll leave a link to the live chat that we did. And then the third of my top 3 is not a 2019 release, but I did read it this year, and that is Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta Chase. When I read this book, I pretty much kicked myself for not reading it sooner. A lot of romance readers have this book as one of their favorite romances of all time, and I can absolutely understand why now. It's one of my all-time favorites as well. It is such a good historical romance. It's got the best banter that I've ever read in my life. Such a good enemies to lovers romance. It's got kind of a Beauty and the Beast vibe just because of the beastly, ugly hero. Sebastian, the hero, is a marquis and basically a rake. He just does whatever you want and doesn't ever want to settle down. Jessica, the heroine, is one of my favorite heroines of all time. She doesn't really give a crap about who he is and how much money he has, what title he has. These two go head to head so well. The banter, the wit between them is just like so good. I love that Sebastian was basically just baffled by Jessica, by her strength and her sharp mouth. She doesn't back down from him and he finds that so refreshing. I just love these two together. One of my favorite couples in historical romance and romance in general. So those were my top three. I'm not gonna force myself to choose a favorite between them. So now I'm gonna go with my other 16 in no particular order. So first off was actually my very first read of 2019. It was a great start to the new year, and that is The Kiss Thief by LJ Shen. This is probably my new favorite of LJ Shen's. I love her standalones and this one just blew me away. It is a marriage of convenience kind of romance and I loved it so much. It was super angsty, emotional, intense, and some great groveling towards the end. Wolf is an alpha male to the max. One of my favorite things about LJ Shen's books and why I love her books is her amazing character development, and Francesca has some of the best character development that I read from LJ Shen. In the beginning of the book, she's pretty much forced into this marriage that she doesn't want by her father, but slowly throughout the book we see her grow strength within herself. She learns to stand up for herself and stand up against Wolf, who, as much as I love him, can be a jerk at times. Next is my queen, Penelope Douglas, and Kill Switch. This is book 3 in the Devil's Night series and probably should not be read as a standalone. This is Damon's book, the one that everybody's been waiting for. He is basically the baddest and most dangerous of the 4 horsemen. He was sent away to prison because of the heroine, and now he's out of prison. He did some pretty awful things in the first 2 books, and it now comes down to this and Damon wanting some revenge on Winter. It is a dark romance, so Damon does do some very questionable things, but I loved him. I loved his tortured character. But I also loved Winter too. She's actually blind, and the last person that she ever saw was Damon. I just love that these two were always meant to be. They've always been such prominent people in each other's lives, so the romance is just so intense and addicting. I loved it. Penelope Douglas did an amazing job with writing a hero that people can easily hate. This book definitely has me so hyped for Will's book, the last book in the Devil's Night series. Next is The Rose by Tiffany Rice. This was actually on my past best of 2019 books so far video. It's just so very different. The romance itself is not too heavy. It focuses more on the Greek and Roman mythologies that are retold in a erotic light. This book is kind of a spin-off to Tiffany Rice's other book, The Red. It's about the daughter of that couple, and Leah receives as like a graduation present this cup, this kylix, that when you drink from it, it turns your fantasies to erotic life. And she's always been obsessed with Greek mythology, and they are very, very dirty. Tiffany Rice's writing blows me away every time. She is the best erotica author that I've come across. And if you're new to this author, The Rose or The Red is a fantastic place to start. Next is my paranormal romance queen, and that is Nalini Singh, Wolf Rain. This is book 3 in the Side Changeling Trinity series, which is a spin-off of the original Side Changeling series. I love this one so much. I mean, I just love the Side Changeling series. It's one of my top favorite, if not the top favorite paranormal series for me. me. And even better, this one we're back with the Snow Dancer Wolves, the Snow Dancer pack with Lacey, the hero. He is so perfect for the heroine, Memory. He's just so protective and growly sometimes. Memory is a Psy, so kind of human but with powers. Memory was kidnapped as a young girl and has some trauma from that, obviously, but she never loses this like inner strength and feistiness. I admired her so much, and Lacey was just the perfect match for her. He was able to bring her out of her shell and just like give her all the love and affection that she deserved. This was just a beautiful paranormal romance. I loved being back with the Snow Dancers with Hawk. I will say though that there are a lot of characters in this book, in this whole series basically, and if you haven't read it from the beginning, you might feel a little lost. Next is gonna be 2 books in a series. I'm gonna cheat a little bit because it's not a duet, and that is Mine Till Midnight and Love in the Afternoon by Lisa Kleypas. This is book 1 and 5 in the Hathaway series, the first book and the last book. Mine Till Midnight is about Amelia and Cam. Amelia is the oldest daughter of the Hathaways, and she's basically taken responsibility after the death of their parents. She ends up falling for Cam, who is part Roma. He was the perfect counterpart to her. So romantic, so passionate, and he brought a lot of that out of her as well. He's a very wealthy character, but always feels like an outcast because of his Roma half. But he finds this amazing family to fall in love with and be a part of in the Hathaways and with Amelia, and I thought that was just so beautiful. He uses a lot of his charms to break down Amelia's walls, and it was just amazing romance to read. But I also had to include Love in the Afternoon, the last book in the Hathaways, just because I loved it so freaking much. If I had to choose like a top favorite of the Hathaways, Love in the Afternoon would be it. Beatrix is the quirkiest of the Hathaways. She's always like felt more comfortable and relatable with animals rather than other people. She's always adopting animals and taking care of them. Her romance is an epistolary kind of romance, one that develops through like letters, the written word basically. She writes these letters for her friend to a soldier, and they both fall in love together through those letters while he's at war. So when he comes back from war back to England, he wants to marry the woman that he's been writing to. The whole time you're just waiting on pins and needles for Christopher to find out the truth. It's an amazing romance. I love these 2 characters. They are the sweetest, most adorable couple ever. And I also loved all the animals in this one. I think if you read Tessa Dare's Wallflower Wager and you love like that animal aspect too, you will definitely love Love in the Afternoon. On to the next book, which is probably the book that I've reread the most this year, and that is Bitter Heat by Mia Knight. This is book 1 in the Singe series. I don't know how long this series is gonna be, but I'm still waiting on book 2. This book is kind of a light, dark romance. It is a second chance romance. The main characters were formerly married but now divorced, and now the hero wants the heroine back no matter what he has to do, like some blackmail and some light kidnapping. This book is so hot. I love the chemistry between Jasmine and Ra. Jasmine is such a strong heroine. I loved her character, and I love that during their separation, their divorce, she was able to move on instead of like pining for him. This one basically just hit all the spots for me. It's exactly what I wanted in a second chance of romance, and I reread it I don't even know how many times just because the angst is so good. It does end on a slightly cliffhangery note though, so if you want to hold off on reading it, I don't blame you. This next book was also on my previous list, and that is Arranged by R.K. Lily. This is yet again a super angsty book, which is my kind of romance. It is a marriage of convenience romance with another jerk hero. Nora needs money, Banks needs a wife, so they make this arrangement, and Banks is pretty much an awful husband in the beginning. It's a super angsty book because of course it is. It's R.K. Lily. It's got some amazing groveling towards the end. I've also reread this one a couple times this year. R.K. Lily just always knows how to deliver when it comes to angst. So the 11th book in my top 19 is Echoes of Time by Kalia Reed. So this one is book 3 in the series, the last in Etienne and Serene's romance. These 3 books focus on this one couple, and it's just a whirlwind of a romance and of a series. I love the series so much, and I thought Echoes of Time was a brilliant ending to this amazing series. I don't want to say too much about this 3rd book just because there are a ton of spoilers for the rest of the series, but the series as a whole is basically a time traveling romance. The heroine from modern day, Serene, she time travels back to the early 1900s to the South and basically replaces the Serene of that time. It's a very unique and different kind of romance. Etienne is actually the husband of the 1912 Serene. Of course, she ends up falling in love with Etienne, who is so perfect. I loved him. Next up, I'm going to cheat a little bit again and include 2 books instead of 1, and they are the first 2 books in the Mackenzie series by Jennifer Ashley, The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie and Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage. I talk a lot about this series as well as the Hathaway series in one of my previous videos talking about romance series that I binge read, so definitely check that out if you haven't already watched it. But this series is one of my new favorites. I always love Scottish Highlander romances. Those kind of historical romances were the first ones that I read, so Scots will always have a place in my heart. Ian is the youngest brother in the family, and he is autistic. Ever since he was sent by his awful father to this asylum, he came back a lot more subdued and doesn't really talk to anyone. But as soon as he meets Beth, he wants her. He's like single-mindedly determined to win her heart and her hand in marriage. Even though he's like a very non-talkative and broody kind of character, Ian has his very alpha moments. He's very possessive of Beth, and I just loved his determination to win her heart. And then book 2, Lady Isabella's Scandalous Marriage, is a second chance romance about Mac and Isabella. Unfortunately, after Mac was a pretty awful husband, Isabella separated from him. Mac wants his wife back and does some epic groveling to win her back. I love that Mac knew that Isabella was the best thing that ever happened to him. This time he has to prove that he's really changed and is not the same guy that he was when Isabella first married him. I love these 2 together, and I love that Isabella made him work for it. Next is Sapphire Flames by Ilona Andrews. Of course, you might know that I love Ilona Andrews. This husband-wife duo is one of my favorite authors ever. They wrote the Kate Daniel series, which is my top urban fantasy series, and this book is book 4 in the Hidden Legacy series, which is a paranormal romance series. I'm thinking Catalina will also get 3 books like her sister Nevada did. I'm hoping so. And even though there's a new couple, you might want to read it from the beginning just to understand like this whole world and this cast of characters better. It's a very slow burn kind of romance. There's not too much that develops in this first book. If it's anything like the first 3 books, the second book is where things will amp up. I just love being back in this world that's like full of magic and awesomeness. I loved Catalina and Alessandro. The Baylor family, Catalina's family, is just so funny and amazing. I love them so much and kind of want them all to get their own books. Next is War by Laura Thalassa. This one is book 2 in the Four Horsemen series and obviously about war. The first book, Pestilence, was one of my favorites from last year, and I'm just amazed that Laura Thalassa can make us love such terrible heroes. Like, these guys are not good guys. War is basically a killing machine and incites war on all the people surrounding him. I love the romance between Miriam and War. I mean, yes, it is questionable and War is not exactly the best of guys, but it's just such an addicting romance. I couldn't put this book down. Next, book 15. We're almost at the end now. This one is another historical romance. It's Bring Down the Duke by Evie Dunmore. This is a debut book from the author, and I was just blown away by it. I was a little wary going into this. I wasn't sure how like the politics and the romance would be balanced, but the author did it so well. It's a very slow burn kind of romance too. The heroine is not titled, whereas the hero is one of the most powerful dukes in London, so a romance between them like a love and relationship between them is not really possible. I just love the amazing chemistry between Montgomery and Annabelle. These two don't get off on the right foot from the first meeting, but once she's kind of forced to stay at his estate when she gets sick and he takes care of her, they get to know each other a lot better and slowly start to fall in love with each other. The angst and the tension in this one was so well done. I just love this book so much. Next is a non-2019 release and yet another Lisa Kleypas book. I'm sorry, I've just read so many of her books this year. Like, I'm going through her backlist, so they add up, and she's just an amazing writer, okay, and I can't help but love all the books that I read from her. I actually just read one right before I filmed this video, and I kind of want to add it to this list. It's again the magic, but I won't. But this one is Dreaming of You. It is book 2 in the Gamblers of Craven series, but can be totally read as a standalone. This is about Derek Craven, the Derek Craven, one of the best heroes that Lisa Kleypas has ever written. Everyone loves Derek, and yep, I can see why. He's a self-made man, went from like the bottom of society up to the top, being a wealthy man and the owner of one of the most infamous gaming hells in London. He's a very cynical and like anti-love kind of man, so seeing him fall in love for the first time with Sarah the heroine is just the most amazing thing ever. Sarah and Derek's first meeting is actually so awesome, pretty funny. Derek was beaten and basically almost about to die, but Sarah comes across this at the exact perfect moment and ends up drawing a pistol on the guys about to kill Derek. So to say that she's an awesome kick-ass heroine is an understatement. I loved her character. I love Derek. I'm just so happy that I finally read this book. I can see why a lot of people consider this book their favorite Lisa Kleypas book. Number 17, I actually originally had Fix Her Up in my previous list, but the sequel kind of bumped it off. So for 17 is Lover Loser by Tessa Bailey. This is book 2 in the Hot and Hammered series, the standalone sequel to Fix Her Up, about Dominic and Rosie, the married couple in the series. It's a second chance romance. Rosie and Dominic need to basically find their way back to each other. I love the angst. I love the groveling in this one. It's a fantastic rom-com, and I love that, of course, the romance is the strongest part. There's also a good amount of Dominic and Rosie being independent and finding themselves. This was just a great follow-up to Fix Her Up, and of course, because it's Tessa Bailey, it's super duper hot. Dominic is yet another dirty talking alpha hero from Tessa. Next is Look the Part by Julie Ann. This was my very first Julie Ann book, and now I pretty much need to read the rest of her books because I loved Look the Part like crazy. It's enemies to lovers, kind of a rom-com. It's so funny. I loved all of these characters, Flint and his autistic son, Ellen, and the way that she gets on Flint's nerves. Flint is the biggest grump ever, and Ellen loves to push his buttons. She's the new renter above his office, so they're basically forced to be together. I was kicking myself for not reading this book and this author sooner. The humor in this one is so good. Ellen actually owns some mice and Flint hates that. I'm so glad I finally read it. And last, the 19th book in my top 19 for this year is Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the first book in the Brown Sisters series and such an amazing romance. It is so sweet and adorable. Red and Chloe stole my heart. I partly listened to this one in audio, and I thought the audiobook did an amazing job as well. Chloe has a chronic illness, and because of this she's always lived in this bubble, but now she wants to break out of it. She's finally like moved into an apartment to live by herself for the first time, and now she needs the help of her landlord, Red, to kind of do some bad things that she's never done before. I was so charmed by this book. I love Talia Hibbert's writing. The wit and the banter that Red and Chloe have is so good, and despite this being like really funny and lighthearted, it's also got a ton of meaningful moments. So those were my top 19 books of 2019. I didn't include the books that I reread this year, even though they're still some of my top favorites like Wolf Song and The Kingpin of Camelot. I reread Wolfsong in audio and then reread this one, Kingpin of Camelot, to prepare for the next book. But I wanted to make room for some newer reads. Let me know what some of your top favorite books of 2019 were. Were any of my books on your list? I would love to hear your favorites. I'm also planning to do a video where I read some of your favorites. I already got a couple from Instagram a couple weeks ago, but that will happen sometime in January. A big thank you to all of these amazing authors for such fantastic reads this year, and thank you to you for watching this video. I'll leave a link to all the books that I mentioned in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!